Light travels in a straight line until it hits something new. Then it bends, it refracts, it changes. That's what happened to me. I thought I understood who I was until I moved from a German school to a Chinese international school. Suddenly, the way I saw the world shifted. The ways others saw me shifted. But my values, my beliefs, my identity, it all bent. It turned around, it twisted, it transformed. But in that refraction, I didn't lose myself. I found something deeper. Today, I want to share about how moving across cultures reshaped me and the lessons I've learned from conquering schools. This was me 7 years ago. My friends would tell me that I'm a confident, outgoing girl. It was happy to talk to me, and it was really nice to have friends around me. But then one day, one of my friends stormed in to my class, and she was telling me, Emma, I got into an international school. The word international was something way beyond my vocabulary back then. I had no idea what it meant and what it could mean for me in the future. So that day, when I went back home for dinner, I asked my mom, Mom, what does international mean? My mom explained it in a way I would understand as a small child. She told me, being international, going to international school means that you can go to see the world better. You can go travel in countries outside of Germany. You can go travel outside of China. And that was my dream. I loved traveling. I loved viewing cultures. I loved viewing different countries' landscapes, which were different from those that I was familiar with. And then the seed of motivation of going to an international school grew in me. I wanted to go international. So that month, I started doing my applications. I wrote in forms I needed to do, and my mom helped me to shuffle up. That March, I was facing my first entrance exam in my life. I didn't work anyways because my friend got in, and then we grew up in similar cultural backgrounds, and then we had the same way of studying. So I believe if she gets in, I will get in easily too. But then when I opened the test papers, I found out those letters, those English letters, the same alphabet as in German alphabet, they were different. Those letters were dancing around like monkeys in a rainforest. I found nothing I could understand. And that made me so miserable. I went home crying after that test. I told my mom, I feel like I had a gap, between the gap from Earth and Mars. It's so big, I'm not going to fulfill it in my entire life. I felt like my dream was dead. Of course, I didn't get into that school in that first entrance exam. But then my mom and my dad told me I shouldn't give up. I needed to work harder to close that gap up. I needed to small-in that gap. And that's what I did. I worked harder. I started to go to lessons outside of school. I went to do more practice questions, and then I learned how to get interviewed. That November, I faced the second entrance exam. This time, when I opened the paper, those monkeys, they lined up. They were standing in a row for me to analyze. And I knew. I started to understand what was on the test paper. The gap between me and the international students, it was not as big as I thought. Sadly, I didn't get in that time again. But then I knew I was improving. I had the motivation in my mind, and it was growing and growing and growing. So that next March, the next year, I tried again. And this time, I got in. I was so happy. I was dancing around all day, and my mom was also very proud of me. And she told me the effort I've put in, the work I've put in, they got back to me in the form of getting into that school. That June, we went to the school again. We were talking to the principal, same as other parents and other new students, to talk about how the schools were different, how systems changed, how we were taking IP, IB, AP, or A-level courses in the future. After that, me and my mom went to the cafe on the other side of school. We sat down, and then in the meantime, while my mom went to get food and drinks, I overheard a conversation which I will never forget in my entire life. There were parents sitting on the table next to us with their children, and they were talking in Mandarin, assuming that I won't understand it because I had a foreign look. I can clearly remember that one parent telling her child, "Look, baby, see that foreigner over there? She's the reason that you don't get it. It's harder for you to get it." Because international schools, they want diversity. They want people who are different to others. That's why she doesn't need to put in any effort. She doesn't need to work. She doesn't need to do anything to get in. Every single word stung into my heart like a needle. It hurts. Those parents, they had no idea what that would do to a child like me back then. I wish I could travel back in time and then protect my little self. I would tell those parents, no, Emma should work very hard to get into this school. She was improving over time, and she knew that. But I couldn't because we can't travel in time. So, that was the really first time I was conscious that people were viewing me different to people who were my peers, who were around me, and who were in the same environment. But then when my mom came back with a tray of sweets, with a tray of drinks, I had that in the entire back of my mind. Because who wouldn't like drinks, and who wouldn't like treats? So I was telling my mom I was really happy to join that school, and then time passed really quick and September came. I joined that school I really wanted to join, because that would get me closer to my dream. Initially, I was really happy when people came around me and then they started conversations with me. And every time they found out, oh, I speak Mandarin. So they would tell me my Mandarin is great. They would tell me my fluent Mandarin is what they have never said about me. So was my Mandarin great? It is occasionally. If I was always in a German school, I've never learned Mandarin, and I suddenly speak fluent Mandarin, of course my Mandarin is great. But when we look back in my life, my mom has taught me Mandarin like almost my entire life. And then I have been speaking and practicing every day. Was my Mandarin still good? Was it the same, evaluated like the same standards as my peers? Clearly no. Over time, I felt like a toxic confidence was growing in me. I believed that I was great, I was special. I felt like a green apple in a basket of red apples. I was somewhat separated and easily to be found in the others. And that is what almost made me feel like I could be special by doing nothing. And that difference made me realize it has ignored all my efforts and all the work I've put in. I felt like I was trapped in the Garden of Eden. I was somewhat protected. But then when I stepped out of it, I needed to realize the crucial truths. People started to have stereotypes on me. I was a first-hand subject of stereotypes. People were making assumptions, they defined me differently. And if you first look at me, what would be an assumption you would like to make? Do they limit people? I didn't want to be limited by those standards and stereotypes. I wanted to be evaluated the same as my peers. It was so hard to do that because all my friends around me, they were telling me I was good, I was special, and I couldn't have real feedback which would help me improve. Then, that time, I locked myself up every time I got home into my room. And even though my parents were really busy, they found out something was wrong with me. So one day, they took me out of my room, they put me on the dinner table, and they were telling me, Emma, we need to talk. And that's when they brought up a word I've never knew before, and it is review. Review by definition means to examine or study again, to look back on, take a retrospective view of, to go over or examine critically or deliberately, to give a critical evaluation of, to hold a review of. You might think of, oh, I might go through my past papers, I might go through all of my studies. No, reviewing doesn't only mean that. Reviewing means going through my social life, my friendships, the way I approach people and the way people approach me, how I identified myself, and how I may have stereotypes on people and identified them. And then we concluded that I needed to change. I needed to make friends who would truly value the true me, They would talk to me to my personality instead of my appearance. And I should also keep reviewing on what I was doing and what I am going to do. When I had all these plans in mind and I was trying to start doing them, boom, COVID came. I know that COVID might have been like a disaster to a lot of families. It is indeed also a small disaster to my family. But on the other hand, it was a great chance I had in my life. Because everyone was sitting in front of a computer screen. Everyone was there, a profile picture instead of a physical being. I could be a meme on the first day, and then I would transform into a cat, and then I'd be a cartoon character on the last day of the week. And I realized people started to evaluate me the same as everyone else. I got somewhat normal. I wasn't that green apple in the basket of red apples. We were all fruits out of the sun. And that's what made me really happy. I made friends who would point out my flaws. They would honestly give me feedback when I did something wrong, when something wasn't correct for me to do. But they would also be proud of me by the true heart of what I've been doing and what I'm going to do, because they knew that was good. Another thing COVID was really helping me on is building up a healthy study environment and the way I've been studying. It gave me a chance to slow down, to review on whatever I've done and I needed to catch up with. So when school started again in 6th grade, I had friends who truly supported me. I had ways to approach my studies in a healthy way. I had the chance to slow down and re-examine my life. The truth my friends have told me have meant a lot to me. They didn't view me as anything different. They just viewed me as a normal person. Sorry, I think my flashlight went off. But also going through all my life and reviewing about it meant that my definition of success has changed. It wasn't just being confident and happy. It changed to become having a clear goal, setting a reachable standard, and work hard for it, putting enormous effort and work in it. The hard work, the journey, was more that I valued instead of the outcome, and that was how I defined success. Success is surrounding yourself with people who see you as you. Success may be the way it made me define differently due to the different environments and the different contexts. Through my new experiences I had in life, I was able to develop a sense of identity, to question stereotypes that people defined me as. I was constantly reviewing and questioning about life and what I am valuing. It's the approach which makes me truly understand who I am, who I could potentially be by putting hard work into it. You can understand it as learning a new language. At first, you rely on translations, you rely on definitions. Am I more German or am I more Chinese? Do I belong here or do I belong there? But over time, I developed my own sense of the language. I define myself instead of relying on these surroundings and fixed definitions. And that's the key. Who you are is not just what you were born into, but who you choose to become. Some people believe that identity is like a mirror. It reflects who you are. It's fixed and clear. But I've learned it's more like light passing through water, bending around, flowing around. Moving across cultures didn't weaken my identity. It expanded it. It forced me to question, to learn, to grow. And maybe that's the real privilege I had. Not standing still, but moving, changing, and seeing the world through more than just one lens. In those shifts, we don't lose ourselves. We discover who we were meant to be. Thank you.